Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to the Ebert Lecture today. I am Dr. Andrea Ewing-Reed. I'm the Associate Dean for Student and Multicultural Affairs at HMS, as well as the Director of the Office of Recruitment and Multicultural Affairs. And you are in for a treat over this next hour or so. I am delighted to welcome you all to this lecture, which is given in honor of Dr. Ebert. And I'd like to tell you just a little bit about him. Dr. Ebert was Dean of Harvard Medical School from 1965 to 1977. That was a really pivotal time in our country's history. He championed multiple initiatives and programs that helped to define the very character of HMS. In 1969, he initiated the recruitment of minority students, increasing the enrollment of minority students from 1% up to 10%. He also opened the doors of HMS to women who now account for more than 50% of our student body. He wasn't just an advocate for diversity and for justice. He also established affiliations between the Harvard teaching hospitals and the neighborhood health centers, which were at that point largely removed from the HMS student experience. He created the Division of Health Sciences and Technology, HST, to which many of you have been admitted. And that is run collaboratively, as you know, between HMS and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He initiated the Harvard Community Health Plan, which was one of the earliest health maintenance organization insurance programs. So Dr. Ebert really was a mover and a shaker, a very influential dean here at HMS. And each year, ORMA sponsors the Ebert Lecture. This year, for the last time, we hope, it is virtual, but next year we hope to be in person. And I am delighted that my good friend, Dr. Edward Barksdale, has agreed to be our speaker today. You are in for a treat. I will turn it over to Joseph Boku, who is our HMS president of the Student Council, to introduce Dr. Barksdale.
Awesome. Sorry, had a little bit of trouble with unmuting, but thank you, Dr. Reed, for that introduction. I'm happy to introduce Dr. Edward Barksdale, who is an HMS 1984 graduate. He is the Robert Izant Jr. MD Professor and Surgeon-in-Chief at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, University Hospitals, and Case Western Reserve School of Medicine, an All-American athlete and honors graduate of Yale University. Dr. Barksdale received his medical degree from Harvard University in 1984. He completed a residency in general surgery at Massachusetts General Hospital in 1991 and a fellowship training in pediatric surgery at Children's Hospital Medical Center in Cincinnati in 1994. He began his academic surgical career at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh from 1994 to 2007 and was recruited to Rainbow University Hospital in 2007. Dr. Barksdale has been widely recognized and awarded by colleagues and communities for his service to various missions. A member of numerous national medical and surgical organizations where he also held leadership roles. Dr. Barksdale is a current president of the American Pediatric Surgery Association. He currently works at the nexus of academia, clinical surgery, medical education, public health, and social justice as a passionate advocate for child health and healthcare. He endeavors to invest his academic, clinical, and service efforts to inspire individuals and transform communities at the precipice of hope. In Cleveland, he has been devoted to build programs to address health disparities, particularly in fragile populations of children. He is a co-founder of the Anti-Fragility Initiative, a novel, holistic, person-centered pediatric violence intervention funded by the Victims of Crime Act. He was recently recognized by Mayor Frank Jackson and the city of Cleveland for his contributions to the community. He is the proud husband of one and father of 4 adult children. He serves on the transition team for Cleveland's newly elected mayor. His life and career have been guided by strong values he learned from family and community growing up in Lynchburg, Virginia during the dynamic 1960s. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Barksdale.
Joseph, thank you for that introduction. I actually think you should have just given my talk. I so appreciate that. So for all of you who are out there, I am actually honored and humbled to be here. When I look on the screen, I see someone that I've known for 38 years, Dr. Andrea Reed. I met her at this second look weekend when I was a 4th year medical student. And so, Andrea, I don't want to give your age, but that was 38 years ago. I think you were a 5-year-old prodigy at the time. And then one of the 2 other Eds in the class, Dean Hundred, who's on the line. So it feels in many ways to me like it's old home week. I have to admit to you that this is the moment that I'm always most anxious about in a talk is, will my slides come up? And so I am waiting to exhale, if you will. So I hope that we're okay. Welcome, class of 2026. Congratulations. You know, it's been 42 years since I sat in your chairs. And I was eager, I was anxious, I was excited for a future that had only been an imaginative thought in my mind. And I can tell you that you don't need to pinch yourself. You've really made it. Welcome to HMS. I hope that you will enjoy and treasure your time here, not just the next 4 years, but for your lifetime. This will be an important part of both your personal and professional history. I can only say for me that the 4 years at Harvard were actually transformative. They were incredible. And what happened is that they made me both the surgeon and physician that I am, but in many ways, they were an important part of constructing the person that I am. Now, I know, there's someone saying, who is this brother? He drank the Kool-Aid. Well, in some ways, I probably did drink the Kool-Aid, and I think that I am probably even punch drunk as a result of that. But in all seriousness, this was a great and important time for me. I will not detail the ongoing humanitarian crisis that we are witnessing. It is horrific. But I will say that if you don't think it has anything to do with you today, I would like to challenge the idea. I will simply say now that it is my belief that we must always be willing to look beyond our backyards, to call out those things that threaten humanity, the humanity that we fight so hard to preserve and to protect through study, research, and practice. Threats such as disease, war, hate, violence, poverty, and justice must end. We cannot, you cannot respect the whole of humanity if we negate the things that make us most human in the first place. So, future doctors, welcome to the assignment. Welcome to the marathon. You know, as I reflected on what I wanted to talk to you about today, relative to my career and my experience at medical school, I realized that there were a number of professional and life experiences, lessons that I learned while I was at HMS. And I've often been fond of saying that I was defined in Lynchburg, Virginia, and Joseph knows Lynchburg, Virginia, and I was refined at Harvard Medical School. And Longwood Avenue in my journals and my speaking has always been euphemistic for the positive experience that I had at HMS and that I had in Boston. You know, as a person who sees himself as an educator and hopefully also a learner, I am also a person who sees himself as an activist. And so over the next 30 minutes, 25 minutes, as I rush through this a bit, I hope to both educate you, learn from you, and also inspire you, if you will, to see yourself in a new way. So my name is Ed. My patients call me Dr. Ed. My adult children call me Dad, and my wife calls me honey. But about 60 years ago, when I heard the term Ricky, then I knew that that was my grandmother calling me her affectionate name. And the voice was calling me to come home, but it was also not just calling me to a place, it was calling me to a purpose. Because before dinner, there would always be some lesson about life in Lynchburg. So I grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia at the end of the Jim Crow era. You guys know that from American history. That was a period of time that was separate, but equal. Well, not exactly equal. I fully understood at a very early age what it meant to be told who you are and what you are well before you can fully understand those things yourself. Furthermore, my childhood was centered around labels. They told me who I could be. They told me where I could go. And in many ways, this type of conscripted life created tiny little fractures or breaks within my psyche, within my spirit. Not only did they tell me those things, they also told me what water fountain that I could drink from. Injustice ran through the streets of Lynchburg. I learned to play catch-in like rainwater after a heavy storm, attempting to remind me of my place in the world. In efforts to try to escape that world, I would look on the Motorola on TV at images from the world that I would see in black and white, and I would see war, I would see violence, I would see intolerance of lifestyle. I would see our beloved leaders. And as a voyeur on all these things, it deeply impacted me, but it never took away hope because I had a strong family, mother, father, sister, grandmother, and a community, and even outsiders that some of you might recognize who directly came to my home, supported my family in their struggle. And the weird thing is that crazy grandmother of mine who was the daughter of formerly enslaved people, she always talked to me about being Archimedes. You know Archimedes. Archimedes says, with a lever and a place to stand, I can move the world. And I'm not ashamed to say now that in my 60s, I still hear that grandmother saying, you can move the world. And I'm gonna tell you the best and the brightest that this is my calling for you. So I know somebody said, you know, this crazy guy, he's got these kind of lofty views, but in many ways, it was this energy, almost a manic energy to do better, to be the best that took me from Lynchburg, Virginia to Yale College, to the doorsteps of Harvard Medical School. And at that time, 42 years ago, felt that success was achievement. And I was in a race, a sprint to get to that achievement line. And so in my mind at that age where you're sitting now, when I was sitting there, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be with the best and the brightest because I felt that would help me move forward in my career. But I have to tell you, when I started in 1980, I made a transition. And that was the beginning. You know, it's been said that the two most important days of your life are the day that you were born and the day that you realized what you were born to do. So you know that I was born in Lynchburg, Virginia, but what you may not know is that my second birth, when I realized what I was born to do, occurred a half block down from Vanderbilt Hall in this building, Boston Lying In Hospital, which I think now is an office building. It's now been incorporated in the big Brigham and Women's. And on the second floor of that hospital, October 21st, Tuesday afternoon, 4:30, I went to see a delivery. And it has been the most exciting thing, other than the delivery of my own children, that I've ever been a part of in my life. So there in the room was a 14-year-old Latina, her 30-year-old mother, grandmother to be, her 50-year-old great-grandmother. No one on the upside of the ether screen spoke any English. On the downside of the ether screen were 15 of us, like we were at the theater watching this 14-year-old girl deliver the most beautiful caramel-colored person I had ever seen in my life. Initially, I was a bit shocked by a lot of it was shock and awe for me as my first delivery. But I always wondered when that baby was born, what was her life going to be like? Would she be like her mother? Would she have a baby at 14? Would she be a housekeeper? Would she be my surgeon? Would she be president of the United States? And I realized that there were a lot more important things in medicine than just chemistry and physiology and biochemistry and all of those things. But nevertheless, I was on now moving from the sprint to the marathon of medical school. And I think that even though I was probably not even as organized as this guy, I was still thinking about that cherub that I watched being born on the second floor of the Boston Lying In Hospital. So I give you my life's narrative to really set up the lessons that I'd like to talk about today, because when you think about how you see the world, it's always based upon your background. But there were 5 lessons that I'd like to share with you about my experience at Harvard Medical School, and I hope that these will resonate. So the first, P equals MD, P equals MD. That was a blessing from the angels when I arrived at HMS, right? So I was that kid. I was that grade grubbing, nerdy kid at Yale who was always studying, who wanted to get an A. I didn't do anything negative to get an A, but I studied hard. I did not play hard. I was an all-American athlete. And when I went to Yale, my mother said 3 things. She said, no girls, no drugs or sex. No drugs or alcohol, no sex, and no sports. Well, I was able to stay away from 2 of those. And so I ended up being an all-American athlete. So I put all of that energy into sports. But when I got to Harvard Medical School, P equal MD was absolutely phenomenal. But I realized that P equal MD wasn't about just passing. What P equal MD is, it taught me how to collaborate. Then for me, the P means partnership, because I could study together. And here you see me studying with one of my colleagues there. I learned that in order to do medicine well, I needed to partnership. I needed to collaborate. And so I hope that you will drink deeply from the well of people and friendship that exist on Longwood Avenue when you come there. So I met a woman by the name of PJ, who is now the president of a women's college. I met a guy named Nate, who spent his whole career taking care of indigenous people in the Southwest. I met a guy named Ed, who became a dean of a medical school, a president of a major university, the university I'm in, and then returned to the place of his source. I wish I remembered the Justin Bieber way of saying that, but I can't remember it right now as I'm speaking, but you guys know the song. And then I met a host of other people who had tremendous impact on the world and on my life. And the thing that I learned to collaborate. I learned to work, not in the single-minded fashion to get to the finish line. But as my grandmother would say, and it's now become popular, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I was fortunately able to go fast and far because of people at Harvard Medical School. And as my good friend, Paul Farmer would say, and you can read the quote here, is that most of the important achievements occur due to partnerships. So who are my partners? Lent Johnson. So we're like salt and pepper, yin and yang, but we were best friends. We met, he HMS 85, former chair of surgery at Georgetown, now at George Washington, hepatobiliary surgeon. We've been friends since 1981 when he boldly walked into my room and said, I want to pick you as my roommate. And I'm like, who is this guy? And we vacationed for the last 20 years with our families. And he epitomizes for me as the next person is, if you will, me for he, meaning that we are intensely competitive, but we both wanted to elevate each other and not compete to destroy each other. We were the first two African-American super chief residents at the Mass General in 1991, which was monumental. This was a local page, front page of the Boston Globe, which we got in trouble because we crossed our arms when we took the picture, the way the rappers did. But anyway, we felt bold at the time. And not only did our partnership start 40 years ago, 41 years ago, these are our daughters. 2 weeks ago, looking at the cherry blossoms. We both have 4 kids. Both of us skipped reproductive pathophysiology. We thought we knew everything about that. And once I had the one on the right, my last child, I realized that that led to that, and so that stopped. But our friendship has extended, and there you can see we have been fruitful and multiplied. I'll just leave it at that. Other than Lent is my other best friend, Henri Ford. Henri and I met as 17-year-old kids at a program in New York City for underprivileged kids so that we wouldn't flunk out of Princeton and Yale. Henri's on the board at Princeton. Henri's the dean of the University of Miami School of Medicine. He's worked with Paul Farmer, Bill Clinton, Warren Buffett to help restore Haiti as one of the major principals there. A great friend, a great clinician, a great humanitarian, and if it's not offensive to anyone, a great Christian, not in a way that is exclusive, but it is the source of his humanity. And he will be giving my introduction at the presidency for APSA. He was the one who convinced me to come to Pittsburgh in 1994. He said, remember that conversation we had in 1976 about changing the world? If you believe it, come to Pittsburgh, and these 2 arrogant little 17-year-olds who are now 34-year-old men will pick up on that. And for 10 years, we worked, me stateside, he internationally. And in 2003, we were named by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, the 2 people who made the most distant difference in Western Pennsylvania. So collaboration led to things bigger than ourselves. I also learned a lot about collaboration when I moved to Cleveland in 2007. I moved there for my dream job, to be the chief of pediatric surgery at a major children's hospital. But this is what I found, a city that was racked in violence, and the weight of the social determinants of health heavily weighed upon its people. I learned then that if I wanted to make a difference, could not happen on my own. The magnitude of the problems were too great. I partnered with the chief of police and the mayor of the city, Frank Jackson. And in 2008, we started a program called Operation Focus, which went into the city. I believe you have to get proximate to problems. You have to get in and meet the people. I was in crack houses. I was in drug dens. I was in juvenile detention center, churches. I was in rec centers, meeting with kids, understanding what they were experiencing, trying to be proximate to the problem, upstream to the problem to make a difference. We started this Hard Love program modeled after Ceasefire, and lo and behold, in 2 years, our efforts going into the streets and meeting with people resulted in the lowest rate of murder in Cleveland. And Eric Holder recognized our work with a $2 million award, and when the money ran away, the rates went back up. But we had a plan for that, and we are implementing a plan for that now. The second lesson is no substitute for excellence. Now, someone is saying this doesn't make sense. You just said P equals MD. Well, this is Harvard, the best and the brightest. The bar is high. You want to bring your A game. Unfortunately, my animation is not correct here, but this shows you where I am now, Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. But when I left Harvard Medical School, I went to the Mass General to do surgery. I then did a postdoc at the Biogen Corporation in Cambridge. I learned molecular immunology and molecular biology, and then Cincinnati Children's to do pediatric surgery in Pittsburgh to have my first faculty job, assistant to professor with tenure. I'm speaking fast, stumbling because I want to get through my slides. But the bottom line is that I recognize that in order to do academic medicine, you had to pursue excellence. Can anyone pick me out in this picture? Here I am as a chief resident, not super chief at the MGH. And I'll just suffice it to say that I have often been in spaces and places in leadership roles where I may be the only one who looks like me. But I think that if you find that if you're LGBTQ, you're brown, you're Asian, you're Black, you're female or white male, that you'll recognize that you need to hold your place and to maintain your values. And I learned this by my grandmother telling me all these stories. You could see me in the background there. Again, I seem to be on the left side of pictures for some reason. But as she would tell me, the two things is not what they call you, it's what you answer to. And that's beyond any name. And the other is that smooth seas don't make for strong sailors. And I think it's that mentality that brought me into academic surgery. You guys know what academic surgery is. You train, you train, you train, you train, and then maybe you get tenure. So the path is, you do your training postdoc. And so this is the path that I followed. I was a full professor with tenure at the University of Pittsburgh. And my work, I had a basic science lab in which I looked at this structure here, dendritic cells. We made vaccines. We use adenoviral vectors to transfect dendritic cells. And you can see an animal with a neuroblastoma not treated by EDS vaccine and one happy and healthy treated with the vaccine. I loved science, but I was not able to maintain sustainable funding after 12 years. And I was also called by something greater. But still, one thing I learned, and this is the lesson too, discovery and innovation are a critical part of academic medicine. And I've tried to translate that to others. One of my biggest loves and passion, here I am speaking about my good friend, Lent Johnson, who's looking at you. There's me on the podium. But I've worked with both innovation and leadership development in the Society of Black Academic Surgeons. And for some of you looking out there, you'll see lots of things that seem to be ethnocentric. I have been an equal opportunity mentor for both men and women. I have, and I don't even like calling this out because it's self-aggrandizing. I have two very close proteges who are transgender, and we work to create opportunities. And whoever migrates toward us is there. We've also tried to do innovation. And here we did the first in utero surgery in Western Pennsylvania in 1997, featured on the front page of the Post-Gazette, featured on CNN. And again, this was a child that was going to be aborted. And we went to San Francisco, learned how to do the procedure, and had a good outcome. We've been recognized for our collaborative efforts and our boundary spanning efforts, mostly while I was in Pittsburgh, less so in Cleveland. But anyway, the Business Times recognized our efforts. Cleveland, though, has been a monumental place for me to come because I think that when I arrived here 15 years ago, I thought that it would be a lot easier. But I arrived to a city that is racked with youth violence. And I'm showing you the toughest week of my life, October 2nd week of 2015, when I took care of 4 out of 5 children under the age of 12 who had been shot and killed. And I had to, for that cherub that you saw in the middle, go talk to her mother. She was actually sitting in a car seat waiting, and there's a podcast called Serial that talks about this, waiting for her mother to get candles for her father's birthday cake. And some rival gangs were shooting. And I can only tell you the size of her heart is the size of a lion. I know because we did everything we could. And I remember talking to her mother, and there was her sister covered in blood. I knew that was my call to action. We needed to do something more than we had done before in violence prevention. And so again, I came to understand when I was in the delivery room at the Boston Lying In, I came to understand well at the beginning what the social determinants of health were before we had a name for them. But when I came to Cleveland, going to the streets, I learned that our health outcomes are about where we live, where we learn, where we work, and where we play. Healthcare occurs in the hospital. Health occurs in the community. And if we're going to have impact, if we're going to be that Archimedes, we need to either be in the lab, be in the clinic, be in the operating room, but we also need to think about being in the clinic. I'm sorry, being in the community. And so I had studied this principle at Stanford for a number of years, this concept of human-centered design. And so I won't go into this, but I probably have some ADD that makes me write about a lot of things. But when I went into the community, I took notes, I took journals, I met people, I talked to them. I use a moleskin that has no lines so I can draw pictures and I can think better when I have pictures. And then I have a leadership coach who tells me that you're a little bit crazy, but maybe I can help direct you to be more structured. And so I moved forward and I developed this program called the Anti-Fragility Initiative. And so if you see that boy sitting on the wall, that is me. That is me in Lynchburg, Virginia. Those are those tiny cracks that occurred when people were telling me who I could be, what I could do, what I couldn't do. And although I covered those cracks, those were trauma. But fortunately, someone filled those cracks with gold epoxy, much like they do the kintsugi Japanese artwork. And so more value was added to me because I had been broken. I wanted to do that in Cleveland, to make these fragile children stronger in the broken places. I'll leave that alone. That's its own talk. So the number 3 lesson is to pay it forward. And so these were my mentors and teachers and sponsors at Harvard. Al Poussaint, who you know, Judah Folkman, people who made a tremendous difference. And there are 2 people who were very silent in their support that made a big difference for me. Dean Tosteson, who I think is the reason I ended up at Harvard Medical School, and Dan Fetterman, who I was very fond of. I've tried to pay that forward. This is Chris McCullough, one of my proteges. Chris was dot-com millionaire, fell, paralyzed, came to medical school, told he could only do radiology. He's been featured on 2020 and Doctors. And when he showed up on my rounds one morning, you know, I'm like, how the heck is this going to work? A kid in a wheelchair. We got to be close and fast friends. And then one day he told me that he wanted to be a pediatric surgeon. And so in a month, he's going to find out where he's matched. Now, he has movement of his hands. And so we believed in him because he believed in himself and he believed in us. And so we've tried to do a lot in that regard. Here I am as white coat ceremony speaker. I've done commencement speeches at several medical schools, but I love teaching and mentoring, not because I'm helping someone else, but because I'm helping myself. You can't shine a light on someone else's path without it shining more greatly on your own. Again, something my grandmother always told me. Here are the people who, only a few of them who I've served to mentor. In the upper corner is Pat Turner. Pat Turner has the highest ranked position in the American College of Surgeons. She's CEO, first woman, first African-American woman named this year. One of my people I mentor. K. Marie Reed, another protege, first African-American woman chief of surgery in the country. Andrea Hayes, first African-American pediatric surgeon. My little sister, Ayla Stanford, who I spent so much time. She's vaccinated more people in Philadelphia than anyone else and was runner-up, was one of the CNN heroes and was runner-up for the top award. You can see my colleague who's an innovator. And I've mentored a few men that you see on the bottom. But you know, when you grow up in the South, even though my parents were married 63 years, and you mentor everyone, you can't help, if you grow up in a matriarchy, feeling the following thing, that if you educate a man, it's just an individual. And if you educate a woman, you educate a generation or a nation. Not meant to be sexist, guys. It's just the biased way that I grew up, but I try to mentor whoever is available. So as I kind of move forward, you know, so the final part of this of paying it forward is to be a servant leader. And that is to look for the opportunities to give your talents in a way that doesn't shine the light on you, but shines a light on those things that you believe in. The 4th lesson is the one that I first heard when I was in your position 40 years ago. There are all these old guys that didn't look like me, pot bellies, gray hair. Now I look like them, who would say, you know, in the Latin form, life is short and the art is long. And I would say, what do they know? They didn't live balanced lives. What did they know? I sadly realized that life is short and the art is long. And we lost a good friend this year to many of us, and a great friend to Harvard Medical School. And so I don't say this to kind of bring rain to the occasion. I just bring this to help you understand that this is a marathon that you're on, but you'll want to remain balanced. So as I kind of begin to close, I started by telling you that, I was that kid. I was that kid that got to Harvard Medical School sprinting. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to train with you guys, the best and the brightest. Because in my mind, what I always believed was that success was about achievement. But I realized that success really is not about achievement. Success is about significance. And that, as my grandmother would teach me again, the story of the race of life. She said that when you're young, up until the time you're 30, it's a sprint. And then you'll get family, mortgage, career, life responsibilities. You'll go to medical school or something, and it becomes a marathon. You just want to stay toward the front of the pack. But at the end of the day, and hopefully as someone said to me, I'm of the Harvard past, I feel like Ichabod, not Ichabod, but I feel like someone from one of the Christmas carols. I still think I got a lot of juice in me, a lot of blood in me, even though the hair is gray. But the point is, life is not a sprint. Life is not a marathon. What life ultimately is, young doctors to be, life is about a relay race in which you pass the baton forward. So if we go back to the lessons, the final lesson I leave with you is lesson 5. Best in the world versus best for the world. So I hope that the next 4 years will bring you the same joy that this young Ugandan boy has with that head of cabbage. And this boy to man from Lynchburg, Virginia, who was defined in Lynchburg and refined on Longwood Avenue. And every day focuses not on being the best in the world, but being the best for the world. Dr. Hunder, Dr. Reed, Joseph, this has been an immense honor to spend time with you. Thank you so very much for this privilege. I'm open for any questions, and forgive my passion, but coming back to Harvard, even virtually, ignites a fire.
Wow, Ed, thank you so very, very much. I am deeply moved, not just by your lessons, but this reminds me so much of my revisit experience. And what Ed did not tell you, but I have told him, is that Ed Barksdale is the reason that I came to Harvard Medical School, because when I heard him speak as I was a visiting student accepted to many medical schools and trying to make a choice, he talked with the same passion and the same commitment and the same vision as a young man headed towards surgery. And he was the first, I think, Black resident at Mass General in surgery in almost 20 years. And I thought, if this is the kind of person that Harvard Medical School can help to nurture, I think this is where I want to go. And I remember talking to someone afterwards. I was really upset. I was moved by Ed and his colleagues, but I was deeply troubled by the fact that, to be honest, Harvard didn't give me the most money. I was really concerned. And someone wise said to me something so important, and it was, never talk yourself out of something that you so clearly want. It's not a good choice. And it was because of Ed and because of others who talked with such passion and such vision that I decided to make the leap. And I can say that the passion that he has today he actualized that over 40 years, taking these lessons from Longwood. And I am just thrilled to still be his friend and to have trained under him at Mass General. I was in medicine, he was in surgery, and just learned so much from him and continue to just adore him. So thank you, Dr. Barksdale, for honoring us with your presence.